I'm wearing this hat. It's the Jewish War Veterans. The Jewish War Veterans of America were created just after the Civil War. It's the oldest veterans organization in the United States. The shirt's called Red. You wouldn't have guessed that, okay. Remember, everybody deploys. Red Friday is in the veterans, in the military. Everybody's in the game together. Remember, everybody deploys. In 1962, I joined the Air Force. In August of '63, I arrived at Goose Bay, Labrador, my first duty assignment. Goose Bay, Labrador is 1,080 miles north of New York City. The 54th Air Rescue Squadron, the day I arrived was very nice. It was somewhere in the 70s, very nice. At every morning roll call, the sergeants finished with the same sentence: "The snow's coming, be ready." Now, as I said, it was the 70s. I grew up in Los Angeles. I knew nothing about snow. So skipping ahead to about mid-October, one night it snowed, and I woke up, and there were 3 feet of the stuff on the ground. By December, there was over 100 inches, and by the end of the year, there were 200 plus inches of snow on the ground. The United States Air Force is first and foremost a destructive force. It can inflict harm on our enemies anywhere in the world. It has more destructive power than anything else in the world. It can destroy, with one airplane, more than all the bombs dropped on any given day in World War II. But there's another side. It can switch with just a single phone call into the largest humanitarian organization in the world. If there's a disaster, the Air Force is there. It is the only government agency, it is the only agency in the entire world that has the manpower and the equipment to move whatever you need anywhere in the world overnight. If there's a disaster, the Air Force is there. One of the first rescue missions that I was on was a plane went down on a glacier in northern Greenland. We went up and we started a search pattern and we found them. The plane was of course destroyed, but there were 6 survivors. A whole crew was still there, sitting in the snow. We dropped them a radio, we dropped them some supplies. They were all pretty well okay. It was much too far for a helicopter to come and get them, and there was no place for an airplane to land. So the pararescue team jumped out, brought them equipment, and started the 5-day walk to the coast. Each day we went back, dropped them more supplies, and guided them to the coast where a ship picked them up. They were all in pretty good condition. A successful mission. 6 lives saved. The thing that I had not expected about Goose Bay was I got homesick. Looking for something to try and tie me to my home, I turned to the Jewish Welfare Board. That's part of the USO. It has been sending stuff to Goose Bay, Labrador since World War II, and in the chapel basement was a lot of stuff. They set me up so I could use the chapel so I could use the chapel at the base hospital to do Jewish services. Everything I needed was put there so that every Friday night I could go over and do a service. And that's what I did, all by myself. This book is really special because as far as I know, it's the only prayer book in the entire world that's accepted by both the conservative, the Orthodox, and the Reform movements of the Jewish community. In World War II, the Jewish Welfare Board came together with the chaplain service and wrote a book that everybody could accept. And it's a marvelous accomplishment. It serves for a guide for all prayers daily and all the occasions. And you know something? It did make me feel better. After a couple of weeks, a guy came by and said, "Who are you and what are you doing?" It turned out that he was Jewish, and now there were two of us. By the time I left Goose Bay, at the end of the 13 months, there were 12 of us holding Friday night services every week in Goose Bay, Labrador, which is 1,080 miles north of New York City. I lost something. My next overseas assignment was Osan, Korea. It's in Central Korea. And one of the things I had to do was work on a helicopter, an H-19 helicopter. And a part of that job included being a lookout when we flew to Kukin Bay, which is a big hunk of land about 1 mile by 2 miles that is covered by water when the tide comes in and is completely dry when the tide goes out. It's used as a bombing site. They practice dropping bombs. And before the fighters and bombers could go in each time, we had to fly in and sort of herd the kids out. Because it's a salvage place. All those broken pieces of metal that were bombs a few hours ago or a few days ago were very valuable to the people there, and they salvaged them, scrounged them. And it was really kind of fun because the kids knew if we were coming in, it was time for them to get out of the way because it was going to get real dangerous real fast. One of the sad parts was watching them run across the fields, carrying these pieces of metal. Some of them were carrying whole dummy bombs in little wagons. Some of them had real bombs that didn't know it because they hadn't exploded. And seeing a 10-year-old or a 20-year-old disappear in a sudden explosion is something you'll never forget. It's just really sad. One of the things that happened to me at at Osan, was I met Israel Max. Israel Max was enlisted like me. He was Jewish like me. He came from New York City. I came from Los Angeles. He grew up in an Orthodox family in a very Jewish community. The nearest Jewish family to me in Los Angeles was several miles away. In the high school I went to, I was one of 3 Jews and 2,000 students. Max kept kosher. And that amazed me and impressed me, and I decided to do it too. So in the middle of Korea, in 1965, I started keeping kosher. Now, the first thing is you think, well, that's a vegetarian for you. The Jewish Welfare Board sends Jewish Welfare Board packages. And they're just amazing. They just show up. All kinds of things. The most amazing, great package I got was the one that showed up from Passover. The Passover box had a canned chicken. It had a box of matzah, it had a Haggadah, and everything else you could possibly ask for to hold a Seder in the middle of Korea for 2 20-something Jewish boys. And that was just amazing. It was a real proper Kiddush. It was a real proper Passover Seder. Just the 2 of us. So my tour at Korea came to an end, and in November of '66, it was time for me to go to Vietnam. Vietnam was an amazing year. Some of the things I remember from Vietnam. Van Ho Air Base, when the rockets started coming in, I was standing in the middle of the flight line. Yes, I can run really fast. On the Tet Offensive, I was on the flight line at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and I spent the first night in a foxhole with the security policeman, helping defend the base against the Viet Cong who wanted to come inside. We didn't like them. I got a pass to go to the embassy commissary to buy kosher food because I kept kosher the entire year I was in Vietnam. I did it for 10 years after that also. Suddenly one night they came and got me, and they flew me to a secret location in Thailand. About 200 or 300 Jews, all of us Jewish, all of us military, were flown in for Yom Kippur, 30 hours in Thailand. Whole ceremony, amazing day. I remember the argument about whether it was sundown or not. Welcome to a Jewish community. It was a real amazing year for me. A real war, real danger, keeping kosher, keeping observant, finding out a lot about myself and a lot about the world. I spent 21 years in the Air Force. I'm proud of each and every one of the minutes. I wrote a poem about my years. I think you all have it now. Thank you for listening to me. Shabbat Shalom.